The restaurant went dead silent. Don Salvatore, the ruthless head of the Russo syndicate, stared at Claret, the fat, clumsy waitress who had just spilled a drop of Barolo on his table. But it wasn't the spill that made the Mafia boss freeze. It was the ancient, forbidden Sicilian street dialect that snipped out of her mouth in response to his insult. There is a distinct, agonizing reality to being a fat woman in a world designed for the narrow. Claret was a size 22, carrying her weight in a soft, undeniable abundance of hips, thighs, and a belly that no high-waisted apron could ever truly conceal. Most days she was perfectly at peace with the space she took up. She liked her body. She liked its softness, its strength, and the way it grounded her. But on a Friday night at Trattoria dell'Ombra, an exclusive, dimly lit Italian fortress in the heart of Chicago's Gold Coast, her size was a tactical disadvantage. Narrow aisles between the velvet booths were designed for the stick-thin, aspiring actresses who usually worked the floor. Beatrice, her severe manager, who survived entirely on black coffee and spite, had tried to take Claret off the schedule tonight. "It's a private event, Claret," Beatrice had sneered earlier that afternoon, eyes darting pointedly to the way the black uniform shirt strained slightly at the bust. "High-profile clients, VIPs. We need agility. We need discretion, people who can slip in and out of the shadows unnoticed. People who aren't you," was the unspoken end to that sentence. Gladly Claret would have taken the night off, to rest her aching arches, but Vincent had explicitly requested her. Vincent Russo. To the city of Chicago, he was a wealthy real estate developer with a dangerously sharp jawline, tailored charcoal suits, and a gaze that could strip the paint off a Cadillac. To the federal government, he was the newly minted boss of the Russo crime family, a man who had taken over the syndicate with a cold, bloodless efficiency that terrified the old guard. And to Claret, to her, Vincent was the man who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, sat at her station and looked at her not like she was an obstacle, a joke, or a fetish, but like she was the only woman in the room. He didn't look past her weight. He looked directly at it, and then into her eyes, with a smoldering, terrifying kind of hunger that made the breath catch in her throat. They shared a dangerous, unspoken orbit, a lingering touch when she handed him his espresso. A low, gravelly, "You look beautiful tonight, Claret," whispered when no one else was listening. Tonight, however, Vincent wasn't alone. He was hosting his father. Don Salvatore had flown in directly from Palermo. He was a ghost in the American underworld, a legend from the old country who had built the family empire on blood, extortion, and absolute terrifying loyalty. Rumor had it he was here to inspect Vincent's new reign and to weed out anyone he deemed weak. Closed to the public, the restaurant felt like a fortress. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn over the windows, shutting out the Chicago skyline. Thick air carried the smell of garlic, roasting rosemary, expensive cigar smoke, and the metallic, bitter scent of pure adrenaline. 30 men in dark suits occupied the main dining room. They were Vincent's capos, soldiers and underbosses. Sitting at the head table, bathed in the low, amber glow of a Murano glass chandelier, was Salvatore Russo. Even at 70 years old, the Don was a terrifying physical presence. He was a barrel-chested man with skin like tanned leather, thick silver hair slicked back, and eyes as black and lifeless as obsidian. He didn't speak English, nor did he have to. Heavy gold rings on his thick fingers and the way every man in the room stopped breathing when he raised his glass spoke volumes. Beside his father sat Vincent. For the first time since Claret had known him, Vincent looked tense. His broad shoulders were stiff, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. "Table 1 needs the antipasti," Beatrice hissed, shoving a massive silver tray into Claret's hands. Do not drop this, Claret. Do not bump into anything. God help you, if you sweat on the prosciutto, I will personally throw you into the Chicago River." Adjusting her grip on the tray, Claret felt the silver digging into her palms. Her thighs chafed against each other under the black skirt as she began the long walk across the dining room floor. Conversations among the men at the surrounding tables died down as she approached. She felt the weight of their stares, knowing exactly what they were seeing. A heavy, clumsy girl. A liability in a room full of sharp edges. Keeping her eyes focused on the empty space at the center of the head table, Claret approached from Salvatore's left, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Scusate," she murmured, her voice soft but steady, carefully leaning in to place the massive platter of cured meats, olives, and aged cheeses onto the table. To do so, she had to lean over slightly. Her hip, soft and wide, brushed against the back of Salvatore's heavy mahogany chair. It was a feather-light touch, an unavoidable consequence of a narrow space and a large body. In a room wound this tight, however, it was like setting off a bomb. Stiffening instantly, Don Salvatore slowly turned his massive head, looking over his shoulder at Claret. Those obsidian eyes dragged up and down her body, from the sensible scuffed black shoes, up her thick calves, over her wide hips, and finally to her flushed face. Absolute silence consumed the restaurant. The hum of the industrial refrigerator in the kitchen 50 feet away became audible. Claret could hear the blood roaring in her own ears. Vincent immediately sat forward, his hand going flat on the table. "Papa," he started, his voice a low warning, holding up a single thick finger. Salvatore silenced his son. He didn't look at Vincent, keeping his dead eyes fixed on the waitress. He pulled a crisp linen napkin from his lap and wiped his hands, as if the mere proximity to her had soiled him. Then he spoke. He didn't speak in the polished melodic Italian of Rome or Milan. He didn't even speak in the standard Sicilian dialect heard in the tourist markets of Taormina. Instead, he spoke in a guttural, rapid-fire dialect. It was a sound like stones grinding together, harsh and deeply ancient. Born in the isolated, sun-scorched mountains of the Madani, it was a language designed to be spoken in whispers to avoid the law, a language that carried the weight of vendettas and blood oaths. Salvatore assumed, rightly so for 99% of the American population, that Claret was just a fat, ignorant waitress who wouldn't understand a single syllable. "Talia accista," Salvatore spat, his voice echoing in the silent room. "Naiastra farai quantuna casaci mi tocca. Cuci desio travagiu, astavaciu cultiadere. Manda a ste l'aria lontano di mia. Prima ca si fatsu tagliari, a lingua." Look at this one. A sow as big as a house touching me. Who gave a job to this fat cow? Send this ugly thing away from me, before I have her tongue cut out. Dark chuckles erupted from a few of the older capos around the table, the ones who had come over from the old country. Vincent's chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor as he began to stand, his face a mask of absolute murderous fury. Claret saw his hand slip inside his bespoke jacket, reaching for a weapon to draw on his own father. But he didn't need to. Before she could stop herself, before her brain could remind her that she was merely a waitress in Chicago, and this man murdered people for sport, a switch flicked deep inside Claret's chest. It was a switch installed by her Nonna Caterina. Nonna, who was shaped just like her. Nonna, who had raised Claret in a tiny garlic-scented apartment in Queens after her parents died. Nonna, who refused to speak English, who ruled their neighborhood with an iron wooden spoon, and who had drilled her obscure mountain dialect into her granddaughters' heads since she was in diapers. "We are from the rocks, Claret," she used to tell her, pinching her chubby cheeks. We do not let the wolves bite. Clarette didn't cower, nor did she cry. The shame that usually washed over her when her weight was mocked simply evaporated, replaced by a searing, generational heat. Looking down at the most dangerous man in America, Clarette squared her broad shoulders and let Nonna Caterina take the wheel. Megie Sirina scrofaciena di cani e sangue. Clarette snapped back, her voice ringing out clear, loud, and steeped in the exact flawless inflection of his own obscure, violent dialect. Ca un vecchio lupo siccio, chino solo di villano I fango. Si loci te sanu troppo debole pia me presenza, chudi. Better to be a soul full of meat and blood than a dried-up old wolf, full only of venom and mud. If your eyes are too weak for your presence, close them. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. If she had pulled a shotgun from under her apron and fired it into the ceiling, it would have caused less of a shockwave. Freezing mid-laugh, the capos let the smiles slide off their faces, as if their skin had melted. At the table to Clarette's left, Lorenzo, the family underboss, literally dropped his crystal glass of bourbon. It shattered against the hardwood, but no one looked at it. Every single hand in the room drifted toward the inside of their suit jackets. The air turned completely suffocating. Salvatore Russo didn't blink. Sitting perfectly still, his heavy, lined face turned the color of ash. The insult to his pride was astronomical, yes, but that wasn't what had paralyzed him. It was the dialect. No one outside of 3 specific, dying villages in the Sicilian mountains spoke that exact variation of the language. It was a closed circuit, a bloodline marker, and a 22-year-old plus-sized American waitress had just weaponized it against him with perfect, colloquial fluidity. Halfway out of his chair, Vincent stopped dead. His dark eyes darted from Clarette to his father, shock warring with an intense, burning admiration that made her pulse hammer against her ribs. Mechanically, Salvatore placed both his hands on the table. Heavy gold rings clinked against the wood. He tilted his head, his black eyes suddenly sharp, piercing, analyzing Clarette's face not as a nuisance but as a puzzle. "Quasi tu?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper that barely carried over the table. "Who are you?" Standing her ground, Clarette felt her heart threatening to crack her ribs open. Her hands were shaking, so she crossed her arms over her chest, inadvertently drawing attention to her curves, refusing to shrink herself for him. "Mi chiamo Clarette," she replied, switching to standard Italian, refusing to give him any more of the intimate dialect. "My name is Clarette." Ignoring the standard Italian, Salvatore leaned forward, bypassing his son and his soldiers. "Ooh, to sangue," Salvatore growled, returning to the mountain tongue, his eyes narrowing into slits. "De cuo et figia, cut in sinosta lingua pixerida." "Your blood. Whose daughter are you? Who taught you this tongue, little girl?" Swallowing hard, Clarette tasted copper in her mouth. "My grandmother," she said, her voice barely shaking. Caterina Vella, from the village of San Cipirello." The moment the name left her lips, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet by 20 degrees. Actually flinching, Salvatore Russo, the untouchable Don, made a microscopic movement, a slight jerk of his heavy shoulders. Yet, in the world of monsters, it was the equivalent of screaming. Quickly crossing himself, Lorenzo, the underboss, muttered a prayer under his breath. Vincent finally stood all the way up, his towering frame blocking Clarette's body from his father's line of sight. Reaching behind him, his large, warm hand wrapped securely around her thick waist, pulling her slightly behind him in a deeply possessive, protective gesture that sent a jolt of electricity straight down her spine. "That's enough, Papa," Vincent said, his voice cold, devoid of the earlier respect. It was the voice of the new boss. Salvatore, however, wasn't looking at Vincent. Leaning to the side, he peered around his son's broad chest to look at Claret again. Disgust was completely gone from his eyes. In its place was something much, much worse. It was fear. Caterina Vella, Salvatore whispered, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. He looked at Claret's soft, round face, her wide hips, the undeniable resemblance to the woman who had raised her. The Black Widow of the Madony. She didn't die in the fires of '82. Slowly looking up at Vincent, a grim, terrifying smile spread across Salvatore's face. "You fool," the Don breathed, his voice dripping with dark amusement. "You think you brought a waitress to my table, Vincent? You brought the granddaughter of the only family the Russos ever feared. You brought the heir of our greatest enemy." Tightening his grip on her waist, Vincent pulled Claret's soft body flush against his hard, heavily muscled back. He didn't let go. "I know exactly who she is," Vincent lied flawlessly, turning his head just enough to look at her, a dangerous, thrilling promise burning in his dark eyes. "And she isn't going anywhere thick enough to choke on." The silence that followed Vincent's declaration transformed the standoff in the dining room of Trattoria dell'Ombra from a family dispute into the resurrection of a 40-year-old war. Every capo who had reached for a weapon now had it drawn. Half the room, the older men, loyal to the old country, aimed at Vincent. The younger half, men in tailored suits like Matteo and Carmine, who had bled to put Vincent on the throne, aimed directly at Salvatore. Claret stood frozen behind Vincent, her ample chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. She could feel the heat radiating off his broad back. "You dare," Salvatore hissed, his obsidian eyes burning into his son. "You point guns at your own father for a porchetta, a fat pig of a waitress whose bloodline is a curse on our name." Vincent didn't even raise his voice, but the chilling authority in it commanded the room. "The next man who insults my woman will have his tongue mailed to his widow. Put the guns down, all of you." Without waiting to see if they obeyed, Vincent turned, his arm wrapping securely around Claret's thick waist. He didn't care about her soft belly or the wide flare of her hips. He held her like she was the most precious, delicate thing in the room. Marching her straight through the kitchen doors, he left his men to cover their exit. "Vincent, what are you doing?" Claret gasped as they burst out the back exit into the freezing Chicago night. A single father named made a decision that would unravel his entire world. "My manager, Beatrice, my job. You don't work here anymore, Claret," he said gruffly, opening the heavy passenger door and practically lifting her inside. "You're never working another day in your life." Slamming the door, he marched around to the driver's side and peeled out of the alley before she could even fasten her seatbelt. Tearing through the neon-lit streets, the silence in the car felt heavy and suffocating. "Did you know?" Claret finally demanded, her voice trembling. Adrenaline faded, leaving behind a cold, stark terror. "When you sat in my section all those weeks, did you know who my grandmother was?" Keeping his eyes on the road, Vincent's jaw ticked. "No, I swear to God, Claret, I didn't. I just knew that the first time I saw you, you knocked the breath out of my lungs." A bitter, self-deprecating laugh escaped her. "Right. The ruthless Mafia boss falls for the size 22 waitress who trips over her own feet." Slamming on the brakes, Vincent pulled the SUV violently into a secluded, underground parking garage beneath a towering glass skyscraper. He threw the car into park and unbuckled his seatbelt, turning his entire massive frame toward her. "Don't do that," he growled, reaching out to cup her face. His thumbs brushed over her flushed cheeks. "Don't insult yourself. Do you think I care about the stick-thin models my father parades around? They are nothing. They are empty. You—" He let his gaze drop, taking in the full, soft expanse of her body straining against the cheap black uniform. "You are everything. You are soft and you are strong and you are exactly how a woman is supposed to feel in my hands." Clarette's breath hitched. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her fat body and seen power, let alone desire. "But the Vella family," she whispered. "My Nonna Caterina made pasta. She knit sweaters." "Caterina Vella," Vincent said quietly, his eyes dark with the weight of history, "was the boss of the San Cipriello syndicate. In 1982, my grandfather tried to take over the Palermo shipping ports. Your grandmother burned 3 of his warehouses to the ground with his capos locked inside. We thought the Vellas were wiped out in the retaliation. We thought the bloodline was dead." Leaning in, his forehead rested against hers, and then the most beautiful, terrifying woman I've ever met opens her mouth in a Chicago restaurant and speaks the ghost tongue of the Madani Mountains. Suddenly, a sharp rapping on the armored glass of Terrett's window made them both jump. In a fraction of a second, Vincent's hand was inside his jacket, drawing a heavy Glock. But when they looked out, it wasn't a hit squad. It was Lorenzo, the underboss, the man who had dropped his glass at the restaurant. Lowering the window an inch, Vincent warned, "Gives me one reason not to put a bullet between your eyes, Lorenzo." "Because I'm not here for you, boss," Lorenzo panted, holding his empty hands up in the air. He looked past Vincent, locking eyes onto Clarette with a mixture of reverence and frantic urgency. "I'm here for the Donna." Stepping back, Lorenzo watched as Vincent cautiously pushed the door open, weapon trained on the older man's chest. Clarette slid out of the SUV, knees shaking, but she forced herself to stand tall. Squaring her heavy shoulders, she channeled every ounce of Nonna Caterina's terrifying spirit. "Speak, Lorenzo," Clarette commanded, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Dropping to one knee on the greasy concrete of the parking garage, Lorenzo bowed his head. "My mother was a Vella, Donna Clarette. She fled Sicily in 82. There are dozens of us. Sleepers. Loyalists. We assimilated into the Russo ranks to survive, waiting for the day a true Vella heir would surface." Vincent lowered his gun slightly, eyes wide. "You're a rat." "Oh. Oh, pal. I am loyal to the blood," Lorenzo said, standing up. "And right now Don Salvatore is calling for the blood of both of you. He has ordered a hit on this building. He knows about the penthouse. 50 men are coming to wipe you out, Vincent, and take her head back to Palermo." "Let them come," Vincent snarled, stepping in front of Clarette. "No," she said, putting her hand on his chest. It was solid muscle, but she felt his heart hammering against her palm. "We don't hide. Nonna always said a wolf that hides in a cave dies in a cave." Looking down at her, a feral, awe-struck smile broke across Vincent's handsome face. "What do you suggest, my queen?" "Lorenzo," Clarette said, turning to the underboss. "How many Vella loyalists are in Salvatore's strike team?" "At least 20, Donna Clarette." "Call them," she instructed. "Tell them it's time to wake up." 30 minutes later, the ambush happened, but not the way Salvatore planned. They didn't go up to the penthouse. Instead, they waited in the sprawling, shadowy expanse of the underground garage. Clarette stood in the dead center under a flickering fluorescent light, making no effort to hide her size or her presence. She was the bait. 3 black vans screeched down the concrete ramp. Sliding doors opened and Salvatore Russo stepped out, surrounded by heavily armed men. Looking at her standing there alone, a cruel, victorious laugh echoed through the garage. "Look at her," Salvatore sneered in Italian, "a fat, foolish girl. Did my son abandon you, pig? Did he realize a woman of your proportions would only slow him down?" Claret didn't flinch. Letting a slow, terrifying smile cross her face, she stood firm. "I singhiali manziano ai lupi vecchi," she said in the harsh mountain dialect. "The wild boars eat the old wolves." Before Salvatore could react to the insult, the shadows of the garage came alive. Stepping out from behind a concrete pillar, Vincent raised his gun. But he wasn't alone. From the stairwells from behind parked cars, dozens of men emerged. The twist that Salvatore never saw coming happened in a heartbeat. Suddenly, half of the men who had stepped out of the vans with Salvatore turned their weapons on him. Standing at the front, Lorenzo aimed his gun directly at the old Don's head. Freezing, Salvatore's eyes darted wildly around the room. He was completely surrounded, betrayed by his own ranks. "What is this?" Salvatore roared. "This is the end of your reign, Papa," Vincent said coldly, stepping up beside Claret. Reaching out, he laced his fingers through hers, holding her hand for all their world to see. "You ruled with fear, but you forgot that some bloodlines run deeper than fear." Glancing at the men, Vincent continued, "My father is stepping down. He is returning to Sicily tonight, and he will never set foot in America again. If he does, the Vella family and the Russo family, united under me and my queen, will burn his empire to the ground." "Is that understood?" The Vella loyalists nodded. Realizing they were horribly outgunned and outmaneuvered, Salvatore's remaining men slowly lowered their weapons. Salvatore looked at Claret. The disgust was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was absolute, crushing defeat. He had been beaten, not by a rival Don, but by a plus-sized waitress from Chicago who remembered her grandmother's words. Spitting on the ground, he turned on his heel and got back into the van. As the vehicles peeled away, leaving the garage in heavy silence, Claret's knees finally gave out. But she didn't hit the floor. Vincent caught her. Effortlessly scooping her heavy body up into his arms, he buried his face in her neck. Breathing in her scent, he held her tight against his chest. "You did it," he whispered fiercely. "You saved us." Wrapping her arms around his neck, Claret finally let the tears fall. "I guess I'm not working the Saturday shift tomorrow." Ooh. Vincent laughed, a deep, rich sound grumbled through his chest. "No, a more mile. Tomorrow we buy the restaurant. And then we buy the city." He kissed her hard and deep, right there in the underground garage. He didn't care about her weight, her clumsy feet, or her cheap uniform. He tasted like smoke, danger, and absolute devotion. She was Claret Vella. She was soft, she was heavy, she was fierce. And she was exactly where she belonged. Did Claret's fierce Sicilian fire and unexpected Mafia bloodline leave you breathless? If you love this twist-filled romance about a plus-sized queen claiming her power and her dangerous Don, hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who crave intense Mafia drama. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life inspired audio stories. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment?